He wasted his life as the weakest adventurer, forever stuck at the bottom. Regrets haunted him until the end. When monsters poured into the world, even his final effort ended in failure and death. But then came the glitch, regression, and a single bugged stat, maximum luck. Now, every step, every strike, every gamble turns in his favor. Can the fool once mocked as useless rewrite fate itself? Let's find out. This story starts with a hunt for cute silver slimes, incredibly rare monsters according to the adventurers, and there are 4 of them. The adventurers hid behind a tree and kept quiet, deciding to just let them go, but there was one among them who wasn't afraid of some slimes. He rushed forward and landed the first hit with a critical hit, and then the second hit was critical again, and finally the third. Each of his hits was critical. With this, he easily killed the slimes, and the system reported that player Yukito Takahashi received the following S-rank items: silver slime armor, gloves, and boots. He looked at the items dropped by the monsters, and one of the adventurers exclaimed in surprise that he killed them all at once, and each with a critical hit, and the loot, it seems, was quite rare. They called him lucky, and in the meantime, he checked his inventory and thought that he couldn't even believe that all this was of such a high rank. Too good to be true. It was like a reward for all the hardships he had gone through in his past life. His fate in his previous life was bad enough. He had been an adventurer until the end of his life, but he had never been able to rise above the bronze rank. And so, an 85-year-old man went to the first floor of the Tokyo dungeon. All the adventurers were excited about something. One of them showed the others the news that the monsters had already reached here, so it was no longer safe outside. In Tokyo itself, chaos reigned now. Monsters had covered the entire city and were starting to destroy it, so the adventurers decided to go deeper into the dungeon. But one of them disagreed with them, because the monsters from above would simply catch up with them. He ran up to the old man and said that he had better run away too. It was not the time to hunt slimes. But Yukito remained silent and pushed his hand away, then headed towards the slimes. While everyone else ran towards the entrance, he walked towards the monsters. While the adventurers were saying that he had clearly gone crazy, a useless old man whose status would never rise again. One of the adventurers pushed him, telling him to get out of the way, and he fell. But even so, he decided not to give up and took his sword and stood up. It seems that decades have passed since adventurers appeared, and with them the usual system of characteristics for everyone, but with individual types of development. The level rises when you defeat monsters, and along with the level, the characteristics grow. Sometimes adventurers are even granted magic or skills. This is a common thing, but only he did not stand out in any way. His characteristics were very low, even though he was level 98. He tried his best, defeated weak monsters, and eventually reached level 98. No one could defeat him anymore. He was the only one who managed to achieve this. Just like he did in his youth, he continued to chop up the slimes, and when there were only a few monsters left, his sword broke and he threw it. The maximum level is 99, the last one left. His efforts will be fully rewarded once he reaches the top. So he decided to pounce on the slime with his bare hands with a loud scream and started beating it, thinking that no doubt the growth of characteristics is just delayed. Apparently, this is the case. He began to tear the poor slime apart with his teeth, and finally the coveted system window appeared before his eyes. The system congratulated him on reaching the maximum level, and he thought with trembling hands that it was finally time to receive a reward for all his work. But his expectations were not met. For all his work, the system increased his strength by only 1 unit. He looked at the characteristics window in shock, and then fell to his knees and screamed, "Are they kidding me? Was it all in vain? So he won't get anything?" He grabbed his head and started crying. He could no longer move forward. Now hope had finally left him. He didn't notice how monsters surrounded him from all sides, and only when he looked around did he realize how many of them there were. He also realized that he had lived his life in vain. Everyone looked down on him. He couldn't even save his loving mother, and he ruined the happiness of his only younger sister. This life had come to an end. After that, a huge monster stepped on him, and the system reported death. But another system window appeared, reporting an error in his stat system. The life recovery and rollback function was applied. Hidden parameters were detected. Bonus stats were awarded as compensation. Unique stat points plus 9999. When he opened his eyes, he found himself at the front desk of the Adventurers Guild, and the girl, giving him his token, congratulated him on being an adventurer now. He looked at her with confusion, then started looking around, and she asked if something was wrong. He smiled awkwardly and told her that everything was fine, then took the token and thanked her. He stepped aside and took out his phone, checking the date. March 15th is the day he registered in the Adventure Guild. But what happened? He remembers that right before his death, he saw something about bonus characteristics. He decided to check his characteristics window, but seeing that they were still at the same level, he laughed nervously and thought that it could not be otherwise. He noticed a slider nearby and scrolled down the list, and imagine his surprise when he saw that his new luck characteristic was pumped up by 9999 units. He was very confused. This was not there before, and he thought that this characteristic was probably a hidden parameter in his past life. But he can't believe it. He looked at his hand and, remembering how he had completely despaired before his death, he thought, and such a characteristic for a person who has 70 years of failure behind him. He headed towards the exit of the guild and decided to immediately check the new characteristic in slime hunting. After a while, he found himself on the first floor of the Tokyo dungeon, Immortal Traces. He looked into the distance with a smile and saw his old friends, slimes. Some suspicious rustling was immediately heard behind him. He turned around and thought in surprise, is this really a silver slime? This is an incredibly rare monster that he only came across once in his entire past life, and then he ran away as soon as he saw it. These slimes give an unprecedented amount of experience points, but are famous for their elusiveness. He took out his sword and began to quietly approach it. Just one step, and his sword will catch up with him. But when he was almost close to the slime, an arrow flew into the ground in front of his feet, and some adventurer apologized to him and said that he missed. MC mentally called him a stupid idiot, and when he saw the slime, who was nervously rushing around near the arrow, he was very surprised. It should have run away from such a noise. Suddenly the slime jumped towards him and dodged, thinking that it was attacking him. The slime landed not far from him, and then jumped towards him again, and Yukito squeezed his sword tighter, after which, he parried the blow and immediately pierced the core of the slime. The slimy shell of the monster spread out on the grass and the core cracked. Because of killing it, his level immediately rose by 4, and looking at his sword, he thought that it broke from one blow. Silver slimes are so durable, he needs to buy a new weapon. While he was putting the broken weapon back into his inventory, he noticed a golden glow behind him and exclaimed that this couldn't be happening. In front of him on the grass was an S-rank sword that had fallen from a slime. He picked it up and said that this was a great start. The system reported that he was holding a silver slime greatsword. It gave increased attack power and also had a 30% chance of missing the target due to the silver slime's tendency to evade. He enthusiastically stretched his shoulder and decided to have a good hunt. When he turned around, he saw 4 silver slimes in front of him at once. It was so amazing that at first he even thought that this was a dream. All 4 pounced on him at once, and he, getting into a fighting stance, thought that there was no other choice. He would have to fight. Given the characteristics of this sword, it would not be possible to hit them all with one blow. But even so, he pounced on the slime and started killing them one by one. All his hits were critical, and when he finished off the last slime, he found a lot of high-rank equipment on the grass. He picked it up and thought with a smile that somehow he still managed to defeat them all at once. His hunt continued for about another hour, during which time he encountered only 10 silver slimes. Each of them dropped rare loot, and he had no choice but to admit that luck is not an empty phrase. He was very happy and lay down on the grass, after which he looked at the sky and thought that now that he had such power, he could definitely become a significant person and make his family happy. His sick mother and, of course, his sister. Suddenly remembering something, he got up and thought that now he even had a home again to which he could return. After these long 70 years of loneliness, he will finally return home. When he came home and saw his apartment number, he froze in place. He mentally told himself to calm down and wondered why he was so nervous in the first place. Gathering his resolve, he took a deep breath and was about to open the door, but his younger sister beat him to it. She looked at him with a smile and welcomed him home, and when he saw her, he couldn't hold back anymore. He immediately hugged her, and she asked what was wrong with him. Was this a prank with a hidden camera? She laughed and asked him to let her go, but he ignored her and thought that this time he wouldn't let anyone take his treasure from him. After that, they went inside the house, and he told her everything that happened to him. She didn't react to this with much surprise. On the contrary, she was only happy and asked if they could really save their mother with this. He confirmed it and said that he just needed to put in a little effort. The next day, he exchanged the rare items he had received and used the money to buy the highest quality healing potion at the auction. After that, he and his sister went to visit their mother. As soon as they entered, Nozomi greeted her mother with a smile, and she was very happy to see them and asked how they were doing. MC smiled and told her that they should ask her that, after which his sister gave their mother a box of desserts, and she clapped her hands happily, saying that it was so cute. They shouldn't have spent so much on it. They should have eaten for themselves with the money. Her son told her that she didn't have to worry about money anymore. They had another gift. She asked doubtfully what their gift was, and Yukito handed her the potion and said that he knew it sounded weird, but let her drink it. Nozomi said with a proud smile that her older brother earned money in the dungeon and bought this for her. Their mother was surprised and said that he had just become an adventurer. How did he manage to earn so much money? He told her that he was just lucky, after which he asked her to drink the potion, and she drank it all without thinking. As soon as the potion took effect, she seemed to blossom and stared at one point in surprise. Her children froze in anticipation, and soon she happily exclaimed that it was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and it became much easier to breathe. MC smiled, after which his little sister became very happy and exclaimed that everything worked out for him, And then their mother said that the potion tasted disgusting. Her son immediately gave her dessert so that she could get rid of the unpleasant aftertaste, and they went home. The symptoms subsided, and the disease stopped progressing. After a short rehabilitation, their mother was allowed to go home. When the three of them came home, their mother said with a smile that they could live together under one roof again, as if she were in a happy dream. Her daughter laughed and said that it was all real, after which they ate, and their poor mother, who had just left the hospital, began to wash the dishes. While she was doing this, she said with a smile that nothing calmed her down like her home walls, and her daughter exclaimed that she was very glad that she felt better. Yukito said that he was glad too, but it was not enough. His younger sister asked why, and he told her that this potion was a temporary measure. It was not able to completely cure the disease. Nozomi was confused and asked what they should do then. He stood up and seriously said that they needed a much more powerful thing, like an elixir. She asked, is he talking about that thing from TV? An item that the best adventurers in the world discovered. He confirmed it and said that it could only be found below the 50th floor and that it could not be bought for any amount of money. She smiled and asked, so it was a unique item? He put the dishes in the sink, adding more work to his already sick mother, and confirmed it. After which he thought that a unique item was a special thing that could only be used by the one who originally took possession of it. A reward that could only be obtained by defeating a powerful creature. His sister asked if they couldn't buy it. Did that mean they had to find it themselves? He confirmed it and put more dishes in the sink, and his sister, starting to help her mother, asked, could he go below the 10th floor? He told her that, in theory, he couldn't, that he would die a dog's death on the way, and she exclaimed, so they wouldn't see the elixir? He smiled, and pointed out that he had said it was only in theory, then looked at his mother washing the dishes, and thought that not only had he gained luck, but he had also retained the knowledge from his past life. The elixir could be found on high floors as well. He had heard of one exception, and that was the boss on the 20th floor, the ancient golem. The unique loot from this golem was the elixir, but the chance of this boss appearing was extremely low. He needed a rare item from such a rare boss, so it was all a matter of chance. He had only heard of getting the elixir from this boss once in his past life, but with his luck, he would definitely be able to find it. He opened the fridge with a smirk, and his little sister noticed that he had that suspicious expression on his face again. He took out a bottle of some kind of drink and asked, is it really that suspicious? She said it didn't matter, then took out the glasses and winked at him, saying that he could do anything. He smiled back and agreed with her, then poured the drink into the glasses and said that he still needed to prepare before going to the dungeon. There was always a loophole everywhere. Time passed, and the moment had come to go to the dungeon. He began to collect things and decided to start with equipment. To begin with, he took the sword that he had recently received from a silver slime and also put on a sweater called Silver Slime Tears, which had a 33% chance of reducing damage taken. His sister looked into his room and asked if he was already leaving. He confirmed this and she asked, so he was going to go like this? Usually warriors wear heavy armor when going to dungeons. He smiled awkwardly and scratched the back of his head, agreeing with her. But he wouldn't have the strength to wear something like that. He thought that the stats window reveals a person's potential. He can only hope for luck. With such stats, he won't be able to handle full gear, so he'll only take a sword from the heavy stuff. But thanks to leveling up, he has a lot of skills. For example, Mighty Layered Strike is a combat skill that has a 30% chance of making 3 critical hits in a row. His sister asked if he wanted to improve his stats. There's a 5th floor there called Alice's Crown. MC said that rare loot can be obtained from local monsters, a magic fruit, and it will help him. He headed to the front door, and Nozomi asked him to take care of himself, after which she gave him a bento and said that although he could eat his fill of fruit there, he should still take this. He thanked her and put it in his inventory, after which he said goodbye to her and left. Soon he reached the 5th floor, which was a dense forest full of dangers. He walked forward along the path and thought that the 5th floor was known as the Crown of Alice. Almost the entire space was filled with plant-type monsters, so it was easy to get lost. But this floor was considered low level and had long been cleared by other adventurers. As long as he had the map, there shouldn't be any problems. He reached a small clearing and saw the strangely shaped trees. He took out his sword and thought with a smile that this was the Ent's lair. The Ents set a trap through mimicry, which is why they look like trees. However, their camouflage is not perfect. He picked up a stone from the ground and threw it, thinking that if he looked at them closely, he would notice that the leaves had no veins and the roots were growing in a strange direction. As soon as the stone hit the tree trunk, it immediately came to life, and the roots came out from under the ground and began to lift up what was under the ground. A huge monster grew in front of Yukito. He pulled out his sword and said that he thought so, then lunged forward and cut the monster with one blow, dealing a critical hit. He only needed to predict their appearance and do the deed. He turned around and saw a magic fruit that fell out of the monster. He immediately ate it and felt a slight taste of pear and apple. But taste does not matter here. It affects the characteristics. He checked it, and seeing how 1 unit was added to his strength, he was glad that they were increasing. Thanks to the magic fruit, although its effect is insignificant, even he can become a strong warrior. After that, the most brutal hunt for Ents began. He constantly fought and ate again, and when he opened the characteristics window, he found that he had already reached his limit in pumping. The fruits gave him bonus characteristics. Now they were in the range of 14 to 27. Finally, he has an average combat level. He warmed up and thought it was time to finish. But as soon as he wanted to go back, someone attacked him, and he quickly jumped aside, exclaiming, "Who is there?" There were two guys standing in front of him. They said that it was wrong to take all the loot for yourself, so they came to teach him a lesson. MC looked at them carefully. Judging by their bandit appearance, they were typical robbers of newbies. He said that he did not see any adventurer's ID on them, so they are the type to profit from others. The guy named Hashimoto confirmed this and said that he was just a spoiled brat dependent on his equipment, and his friend, Yamada, added that this equipment did not suit him. If he gave it up nicely, they would let him live. But Yukito quickly dealt with one of them, and now, looking at this idiot lying unconscious on the ground, he thought that it was close, but everything went as smoothly as possible. The bee sting attack the enemy used was a level 25 skill. In other words, his enemy was much stronger. The bee sting attack guarantees a precise hit that the enemy will not be able to avoid. In return, the skill reduces the attack power by 30%. But thanks to his clothes soaked in silver slime tears, he was able to reduce the damage. In short, in the end, only 30% of the original blow's force reached him. If it weren't for his luck, there would be a huge hole in his stomach right now. Hashimoto was noticeably nervous. He didn't think that his friend would be knocked out with one blow. MC pointed his sword at him and told him to surrender, then he would spare him. But he responded by pointing a magic staff at him and telling him not to underestimate him. A warrior can be easily defeated from a distance. He agreed with him and put away the sword, saying that he can't get it from here. And his opponent smiled nervously and asked, did he give up so quickly? He told him that of course it wasn't, then took out a staff from his inventory and said that he would also use something. Seeing his weapon, the guy laughed loudly and mockingly asked if he even knew what that was. He pointed the staff at him and told him that it was the substance of absurdity. He picked it up from the Baron Ents. Hashimoto smirked and thought what kind of amateur he was. The substance of absurdity is a rare item, but this unstable junk activates a random spell, and God knows what kind of spell. The chance of casting something useful is almost zero. In 40% of cases, the owner of it fails. There is a 30% chance of getting a weak enchantment, a 20% chance of getting a buff or debuff, and a 9% chance of creating a mid-level spell. Getting into that 30% chance of getting a weak enchantment would already be a great success. In any case, he won't be able to cast the desired spell. Yukito was in the process of the magic lottery, and Hashimoto decided to use a fireball, a mid-level spell. He thought that even if he suddenly hit those 9% and summoned something of the same level, his blow would still be stronger due to the special equipment for magicians, which adds 50 units to magical power. In other words, victory is guaranteed to be his. The luck inherent in beginners will not save him. He activated the spell and pointed the staff at Yukito, after which he released a huge fireball at him and he yawned, noticing that he finally moved. He was also already finished. He lowered the staff and streams of magic swirled near it, and when he raised the staff, a huge fiery meteor appeared above his head, which continued to grow in size with each second. Swinging his weapon, he directed the meteor and it flew at high speed towards his opponent, sweeping away everything in its path. Compared to this meteor, the fireball of this magician was just a small dot. His spell was dispelled by the meteor and he fell to the ground in shock, not understanding how this was possible. He grabbed his head and thought that he had cast a high-level spell. The chance of such an outcome was 0.05%. When he turned around, he saw that the meteor was already very close, and he laughed nervously, wondering, this is just illusion magic, right? But when the heat hit his face and his clothes and hair began to burn, he felt terrible pain and screamed in horror, asking him to stop. He was so scared that he involuntarily wet his pants, and as soon as the meteor reached him, a loud explosion was heard, throwing up the trees around. As soon as everything calmed down, a deep crater appeared on the ground, in the center of which lay the same guy, only this time without his clothes. From such a powerful blow, Yukito's staff broke and caught fire, and he, having extinguished the flames, threw it on the ground and apologized to the guy, saying that he was just too lucky. Taking a deep breath, he looked at his opponents and thought that he had won, but leaving them here unattended was a bad idea. So he decided to take them outside and, having cut a couple of vines from the trees, tied them both up. Looking at the result of his labors, he thought that this should be enough, after which he went back to the first floor and dragged them along with him. Upon returning from the dungeon, he handed these scoundrels over to the police, and when the interrogation was over, the sun was already below the horizon. Some time passed, he came to the Adventurers Guild and, showing the girl his badge, apologized to her that he had not contacted for so long. There were just some difficulties. She clarified his name and then said with a smile that the police had already reported everything to them, and he was glad that he would not have to explain himself again. But she did not let him finish, and with a wide smile on her face, congratulated him on his promotion to silver rank. She handed him the corresponding badge for this rank, and he said in surprise that there must have been some mistake. After all, he had not done anything. Reaching the silver rank is not an easy task. Even talented people usually need 3 years to do this. You need to get sought-after items, defeat many monsters, in other words, make a valuable contribution to the work of the guild. But the girl said that there was no mistake. After all, he caught 2 guys from Red Arm. They're a widespread organized crime group. He asked, so he got so many points from those idiots that he deserved to be promoted to silver rank? She confirmed it and added that he worked hard. Those 2 people had strength comparable to silver rank adventurers. Hearing this, he was very surprised and thought that they were probably stronger than he thought. He could have ended up in a bad situation if not for his luck. He took his new badge and laughed, saying that he was just lucky, and she noted with a smile that he was saying that again. Modesty befitting a silver rank adventurer. She will look forward to his achievements on the lower floors. The available floors are determined by the adventurer's rank. Bronze ranks can go down to the 10th floor, silver ranks can go up to the 30th, and gold adventurers have no limit at all. He put on a new badge and handed in the old one, saying that he would like to master at least the 20th floor. The girl with a serious expression said that she believed in him, but he should know that this place was quite difficult to clear, so she strongly advised him not to go there alone. He bowed slightly to her and thanked her for her concern, after which he left and thought that he had progressed much faster than he expected. By the way, in fact, the meeting with those bandits was also due to luck. An old man distracted him from his thoughts. He asked him to give him a minute of his time, and he approached him, inquiring what had happened. The old man pointed to the notice board and asked, is he an adventurer who defeated those criminals? There were wanted posters for those 2 guys on the board. He confirmed this and said that they attacked him, and he responded in kind. As soon as he said this, the old man trembled from an excess of emotion, and then, with tears in his eyes, he took his hands and thanked him. MC didn't understand what was going on, and he tore down the poster in a rage and said that they had killed his son. The police couldn't get any closer to them, and he managed to catch them. Yukito became worried and said that he didn't need to thank him. He was just doing his duty as an adventurer. But the old man was still very grateful and bowed to him, saying that now he could bring good news to his son's grave. After that, he left, and MC, following him with his eyes, thought that it seemed like he had never been so grateful in his past life. To tell the truth, it was quite nice. Speaking of his past life, if nothing was changed, the world would be destroyed. If everything went on as before, he would already be old by then. But could he just stand by knowing what was waiting for them? He threw the thought away, because he was clearly not up to it. He was too weak to fight for world peace. He slapped himself on the cheeks and thought that he first needs to at least save his mother. That's more important now. Meanwhile, somewhere in the dungeon sat a guy from Red Arm named Kiru and pounded his fists on a stone table in rage. He couldn't believe that Yamada and Hashimoto lost. If the same thing happens to the others, he won't be able to pay the tax to the thug. He started biting his nails out of nerves, then his gaze shifted to the knife. He grabbed it and, putting it on the table on the newspaper with the news about what Yukito did, pierced his photo with the knife and screamed that he was finished. His crazy gaze burned through his photo, but then he quickly calmed down, and returning the knife to its place, decided to be careful. After all, he single-handedly defeated Yamada and Hashimoto. This means that he has plenty of strength, but he has his own methods, so his strength does not matter. He threw a white cloth over himself and set off, saying that his luck ran out the very moment he found out about it. Time passed. MC had already reached the 15th floor, which was huge canyons. This floor is called the Peak of the Lonely Mountain of Death. There are many winding and narrow passages here. In a word, the terrain is treacherous. Because of the geographical features, it is difficult to clear even in a group. He glanced at the 3 guys who were trying to pass through the narrow passage and thought that it was easier to remain unnoticed here, because this place is a hotbed of crime and an ideal arena for a lone hunter like him. He decided to take a shortcut and quickly climbed the cliff with his sword. But his first opponent was waiting for him there, a huge vulture. He was the first to enter the battle and thought that here he would continue to raise his level, finish training all the necessary skills to pass the 20th floor. He wanted to raise his level only due to silver slimes, but apparently he killed so many of them that they stopped appearing now. So now he needs to kill as many monsters as possible here. Continuing to move forward, he killed all the monsters in his path. Whoever he did not come across, there were lizards and huge stone eyes and bears, and he easily killed them all and received rare items. Meanwhile, Kitu was watching him. During all this time, he found out that he was a loner. He had a great sword of a silver slime, but no armor. There can be no doubt this is definitely the one who killed Yamada and Hashimoto. He began to bite his nails out of nerves and thought that he just did not believe his eyes, that he decided to covet his territory. What an idiot. There's no need to attack right now. He will just wait until he lets down his guard. Soon night fell. Yukito decided to make a stop, and he thought that it looks like he decided to stay on this floor. He strained all the convolutions of his brain, and a brilliant idea came to him. He may not interfere, because this is his territory, and that means he is the boss here. He decided not to follow him anymore, and ran to a shelter. Time passed, and he began to implement his plan. In nature, monsters and animals are divided into ecosystems. He will take advantage of this. He decided to reduce the number of predators and increase the number of prey. When he had killed all the strong monsters in the area, he approached the canyon where the insects lived and threw something at them. Because of his actions, the monsters began to multiply at a furious rate, and if the pyramid collapsed, their widespread reproduction would be irreversible. Now, sitting in his shelter, he decided that the time had come. In other words, today would just be an accident. An adventurer would accidentally end up right in the monster's lair. This would not attract public attention. Taking the insect repellent, he approached the huge swarm in the canyon and said with a smirk that everything was going as planned, only the last step remained. He scattered the insect repellent, alarming the swarm, and told them to follow that idiot and devour him whole, leaving no bones. A huge swarm of insects rose from the canyon, and he spread his arms out to the sides, laughing evilly, while MC killed a boar. A buzzing sound reached his ears, and he turned around, wondering what that sound was. He saw a huge black cloud in the sky and became very nervous, not understanding what it was. And when that black cloud quickly approached him, he saw a huge swarm of deadly cicadas. He looked at them with determination and put his sword behind his back, realizing that he could not handle them alone, and then began to run, thinking that he should join someone. Where does a group of adventurers usually gather? And then something came to his mind. In his past life, he heard that there was a supply base somewhere on this floor. Some adventurer said that since the base was built there, clearing the peak of the lonely mountain of death has become much easier. It is located in a cave made of red mud. However, for some reason, the base was not marked on the map of the area. He looked at the huge rocks in front of him and realized that there was no time to waste. Then he plunged his sword into the rock and started to climb down. He jumped onto some frog that served as a trampoline and continued on his way. He finally reached a cave made of red mud and started to feel it. Then he shouted that there were a lot of monsters here. He needed help, but no one answered him. After waiting for a few seconds, he heard a buzzing noise behind him again and nervously clenched his teeth. Then he started to hit the mud with his sword, shouting that it was urgent. He warned them that he was going to break the entrance now. Then the pieces of mud cracked and the passage opened, but a strange sight awaited him. Half-naked adventurers were lying inside. All of them were tied up and their mouths were gagged. He stared at them in shock and thought, what the hell is this? When they saw him, they immediately started calling out to him, but because of the gags, they could only make a moaning sound. He smiled nervously and asked, did he by any chance find out about the existence of some kind of perverted association? They immediately started shaking their heads negatively, and he, understanding them, took out his swords and rushed forward, cutting all the ropes. As soon as they were freed, they were very happy and said that he saved them. They already thought that they were finished. He asked what happened here, and the adventurers told him that they were attacked. Then they all suddenly lost consciousness. The fact that they were not killed can only mean that they wanted to be sold. Some girl exclaimed that this was definitely a slave trade. Yukito looked at all these adventurers and realized that he had found a criminal den of criminals. He headed for the exit and thought, shouldn't this point be a supply point for adventurers? He remembered hearing about this place when he was older, and he figured that this lair would become a stronghold a little later. One day, the local law enforcement found this place and made it a base for adventurers. It turns out that he just showed up too early. Well, in the past, he was interested in nothing but his life. For 10 years, he just enjoyed hunting slimes, and his sense of time seemed to get weaker with age. But now is not the time for such thoughts. He turned back to the kidnapped adventurers and thought that this really surprised him, but he needed to pull himself together and take action immediately. He told them that he understood what situation they were in now, but that they should listen carefully to him. He pointed to the black cloud and said that a swarm of deadly cicadas was flying towards them right now. The cicadas were already very close, only a few minutes left. The adventurers looked up at the sky and became very worried, and some even started to panic, because there were too many of them. The MC said that as they could see, they didn't have any time, so if they wanted to survive, they should team up with him. And they thought about his offer, because they definitely couldn't hide from so many monsters, and some girl shouted that it was pointless. They had no equipment or weapons. The adventurer agreed with her, because all their things were with the criminals. And then, Yukito looked into the inventory and said that he could give them as many weapons as they wanted. After that, he dumped everything he had and told them to take whatever they wanted. They looked in shock at the huge pile of equipment in front of them. And in order to hurry them up with the decision, the MC said that he could even transfer it to them with the right of ownership. The adventurers exclaimed, "Is he serious? But this is a very cool weapon." They began to look at it all with surprise and noticed that all this equipment was rare. Where did he get so much? They began to wonder who he was. They had never seen him before. After that, they took the equipment apart without any hesitation, and some even began to argue over the weapons. They were very happy with such a gift, and one of them said that if he sold all this, he would get a fortune. After putting on the equipment, the girl approached Yukito and asked if they could really take this. He confirmed this and said that he was not asking for anything in return, but let him command for a little. Some of the girls hesitated, but the guy next to her quickly convinced her. After all, he saved their lives. Another adventurer added that he also supplied them with weapons, and everyone agreed with this, and so they decided to obey him unconditionally. Some were even willing to become bait for monsters. Looking at these adventurers ready for battle, he remembered how the young people had addressed him in old age, and he felt uneasy. He bowed to them and thanked them for everything, to which they responded with smiles, after which he spread his arms out to the sides with a serious look, and said that they would use the narrow entrance of this cave so as not to fight everyone at once. Let them try to kill as many as possible. The adventurers looked at him with a confident look and prepared themselves, after which he smirked and took out a sword from behind his back and, pointing it towards the opponents, announced the start of the fight. Several insects flew into the cave. MC stood in the front rows and killed the cicadas, and those he missed, he gave to the rest. The adventurers began to use their skills to the fullest, setting fire to the insects with fireballs or shooting them with a bow. Everyone worked together and helped each other. Soon, the entire cave was covered with insects from the outside. They were trying to gnaw through the dirt and thus get inside, while the rest attacked the entrance. One of the adventurers, having repelled the monster's attack, cursed and said that there were too many of them. His comrade exclaimed that they were still not ending, and Yukito thought that nothing was working out yet. Will anything change? Pieces of earth were flying at their heads. The ceiling was collapsing. Seeing this, they all became worried, and MC waved his hand, ordering them to retreat, but not to break formation. Soon, cracks appeared on the ceiling, and then insects entered the cave. Because of this, they rushed to run deeper into the cave and stood in one group, ready to defend themselves. One of the adventurers exclaimed that at this rate they would destroy the mountain. What should they do? They could die. He quickly looked around and assessed the situation. The mine was unfinished, and therefore not very reliable, and then something caught his eye. There was explosive lying very close, he thought, so the criminals wanted to expand the mine with it? They can use this. He picked it up and then turned to the others and said that there was explosive in the cave. Let them find it. They, although hesitantly, still started looking for explosives and had already managed to collect 3 pieces. Time passed. For several hours, they desperately fought with deadly cicadas, but there were too many of them, and therefore only 1/3 of the cave remained. The girl took a step back and almost fell, and the monsters continued to advance. She told the others that there was nowhere else to retreat, and the other girl said that she ran out of mana. The guy next to her excitedly exclaimed that the walls would not hold out for much longer, and Yukito, looking at the abyss behind them, frowned and realized that there was no other choice. He called out loudly to everyone, drawing their attention to himself, and asked them to hand him all the explosives. The man threw it to him and said that his idea was certainly cool, but he did not think he had enough explosives to destroy them all. Another adventurer threw him an explosive, doubting the success of his plan, and he, having caught it, told them that everything will be fine. He will blow up the cave, and they will collapse. He looked at the huge amount of explosives in his inventory and thought that monsters with low intelligence, first of all, aim at what poses a big threat. Simply put, they will attack the one who killed the most, that is, him. He took out all the explosives from his inventory, and the girl, noticing how the cicada burst through the hole in the ceiling, warned the others that everything here is about to collapse. Yukito waved his hand and ordered them to run, but they hesitated because he himself was in danger. But he told them to trust him, and then they ran away. He came face to face with a huge swarm of insects, and thought that sometimes you need to take risks. Now is that moment. The system asked, does he want to use 13 pieces of explosives? He agreed and jumped into the abyss, looking at the insects with a grin. The system warned him that he had no detonation skills. The probability of explosion was 50%. He thought that because of the hunter class, the probability of detonation was low, but his luck was high. The system warned him again that the items were damaged. The probability of explosion was 25%. He hoped for luck, and when the system reported the successful use of the item, he was happy. And then a series of powerful explosions occurred, raising a rumble around. The ground was undermined, pieces of it flew in all directions, and MC took advantage of this to avoid falling. Pushing off the debris closest to him, he moved to the others, quickly climbing up, and then grabbed the sword with both hands and delivered a slash, cutting a huge piece of earth. Behind it he saw a cicada, the only one that was not affected by the explosion. The insect growled menacingly and he pointed his sword at it, shouting that it was the end, after which he rushed forward, using the skills of the bee sting, and his hit was critical as always. The body parts of the cicada fell behind him, and he walked with a smile towards the adventurers who were waiting for him on the cliff. They were surprised that he dealt with the monster so quickly, and seeing that he was falling, they were very worried. He tried to plunge his sword into the cliff to hold on, but he did not have enough strength and began to fall, thinking that there was still a little left. Then the adventurers helped him. They threw him a rope, and he, wrapping it around his hand, grabbed it, after which they all together began to pull him up. He was very glad that they did not leave him in trouble, and when he finally climbed onto the cliff, he looked at the huge pile of dead insects below and thought that it seemed like he had won. The joyful adventurers approached him and said that he was their savior. It was surprising that after fighting so many monsters, there were no casualties. While they were all rejoicing, he smiled and the system reported that a large number of deadly cicadas had been destroyed. He was given the title of Exterminator. Now the damage dealt to insect-type monsters was increased by 20%. He also received the skill Warrior's Intuition. Kitu, meanwhile, returned to his hideout and began kicking the table in rage, not understanding how he was able to defeat the entire swarm of cicadas and also destroy their base. He remembered his superiors and clenched his teeth in fear, realizing that they would kill him for this, and all because of this idiot. In order to calm down a little, he began to greedily swallow alcohol, and then smashed the bottle against the wall, and said in a rage that he would personally finish him off, even if it cost him his life. Time passed. Yukito returned to the Adventurers Guild, but now all the attention was focused on him. After that incident, he began to be recognized more often. While he was chatting with a guild worker, the others began to discuss him. Everyone knew him as Yukito the Mountain Crusher, who saved many adventurers. They also began to offer him to join guilds, but he refused, and when he was heading to the exit, people literally gave him a pass. He thought that he cannot join a team yet. Otherwise, it will take more effort and time to get the elixir. Under these circumstances, he will not be able to get it soon. Things and teams are randomly distributed, and the probability of getting a rare item decreases. The more people, the lower the percentage of winning. He left the guild and thought that in his past life, he always cleared dungeons alone. Why should he change anything? Later in the evening, he returned home and saw many freshly cooked dishes on the table. This was the work of his sister and mother. He sat down at the table and thanked them for the food. They prayed, and finally began to eat. When he swallowed one bite, he immediately felt a familiar taste. Despite the fact that their family was poor, they always celebrated holidays. His sister pointed out that he was already on the 20th floor, and his mother worriedly asked, "Is he sure he can handle it?" They say that after the 20th floor, everything becomes more and more difficult exponentially. Nozomi showed him the statistics and said that she was worried about him too. Only 15% of adventurers were able to get past this floor. He told them that everything was fine. They knew what he was capable of. His mother looked at the newspaper clipping with him, which she specially saved, and worriedly said that of course she was proud of what he does for people, but he should not forget about himself. No parent would want their child to sacrifice themselves for others. Because of her words, he remembered her body in the morgue. And then he smiled sadly and said that no child wants their parent to be upset. His mother wanted to object, but Nozomi stopped her and said that she would not change anything. He was too stubborn. Once he had something in his head, he could not be convinced. Their mother sighed heavily and said that he was just like their father, after which MC continued eating and told them to stop worrying about him. He was doing this because he wanted to. They changed the topic and continued chatting, and in the meantime, he thought about how he failed to save his mother in his past life. When he remembers this, his heart squeezes with pain. In order to erase the past and start life anew, he simply needs an elixir. After finishing eating, he thanked them for the food, and then went to the 20th floor of the Tokyo dungeon. The stubborn alchemist is a great wall that does not obey the laws of physics. As soon as he appeared here, he quickly rushed forward, towards the monsters that were nearby. They turned their attention to him, and he thought that the monsters on this floor were made of inorganic substances. They were dangerous and cold-blooded killers, and also not alive. Lunging forward, he swung his sword several times, dealing with two monsters at once, then turned around and saw gargoyles sitting on the columns, one of which pounced on him. He quickly turned and struck, cutting it off, and thought that the only thing that saved him was that they were acting schematically. Having dealt with the monsters, he ran further and stopped, seeing a golem ahead. Its eye lit up red, indicating its activation, and it began to slowly rise. Yukito frowned, preparing for battle, and thought that if he memorized all the moves, he could easily defeat everyone. The golem prepared itself, after which several fists fell on MC from above, but he avoided each blow. Quickly moving from side to side, he approached the enemy and with a sword strike smashed his core, after which he landed nearby, and his opponent's body fell with a crash behind him. Then there was a transition to the next room. Huge doors were presented in front of him, and he opened them with the thought that the time had come. From today on, his new life begins. He walked inside a huge hall, in the center of which was a magic circle, and a second later, the doors closed with a crash. In the center of this circle sat a golem. It was activated by the arrival of Yukito. As he rose, he noticed its body covered in moss, and thought that it was an ancient golem, the boss of the 20th floor. Its appearance is frightening, and its attacks are quite powerful. As soon as he found himself under the golem's gaze, his body slightly bent under the pressure that he exuded from himself, but that was where his abilities ended. Pulling himself together, he rushed towards the enemy, and dodging his blow, mentally noted that for a boss, he had a normal movement speed. He jumped up, striking, and looked at his chest with the thought that if he managed to break off a piece of armor, he would get to the core, his weak spot, and would be able to win. But all this time, he was not alone on the 20th floor. Kitu was here. He carefully looked into the boss's room, and next to the ancient golem, a magic circle appeared, from which another golem grew. Seeing this, MC was very surprised. He definitely did not expect this. He immediately realized that there was someone else here besides him. He quickly glanced around the room, but did not see anyone. He also does not feel the presence of this person. In general, he should have expected guests, but even a newbie would not get into this battle, and they are both on the 20th floor. He prepared himself, and at that moment, a dagger flew at him. Hearing the sound of steel cutting through the air, he quickly turned around and blocked the blade with his sword, thinking that this was clearly a setup. Kitu meanwhile hid behind a pillar, gritting his teeth in frustration at the failed attack and thinking that he had a fast reaction, but he still has more advantages. He's just an idiot who doesn't understand that this boss can't be dealt with alone. He snuck behind him so that the second golem would be automatically summoned, but unlike him, he doesn't have to worry about fighting these monsters. They simply won't notice him. After all, he's a thief, and he's level 52, and with his stealth skills, he's completely safe. He used the cat step skill to quickly approach the second golem, and decided to taunt it while Yukito was busy with the first one. As soon as he struck the second golem, he summoned his shadow doppelganger and walked away to a safe distance, causing the monster to now be targeted by MC. Kitu hid in the meantime, just in case he even took with him an S-rank invisibility cloak, which perfectly hides his presence from enemies. Now for sure, none of them will be able to notice him. 3 against 1. The golems simultaneously pounced on Yukito, which is why he had to dodge, and in the meantime he smeared the blade with poison and threw it at him with the thought that he would also attack, but without fanaticism, he would simply drive him into a corner. His blade wounded Yukito, but the attempt to inflict damage with poison failed, which made him slightly surprised and, moving to another shelter, thought, how did he hide the equipment with the antidote under such weak armor? But it does not matter. It is still only necessary to keep him on edge. Hiding behind a pillar, he threw several traps towards Yukito, and then many balls that released small needles, and thought that he loved all kinds of traps. He would definitely succeed working like this, alone, instead of relying on a bunch of idiots. He stretched a spiked wire, charged with electricity between the pillars, and took out a poisonous smoke bomb, thinking that thanks to his efforts, his movements were now limited, which meant that the moment when the golems would kill him was only a matter of time. Golems were waiting for him in front of him, and traps behind him. Kitu climbed higher to enjoy this show properly. MC, meanwhile, dodged the golem's attacks and called out to him loudly, which surprised him, and asked if he was out of magic things. Kitu was very surprised that he somehow found him, and he, picking up his dagger, told him to come down. Why is he hanging there? After that, he threw a dagger at him, asking if he liked him so much that he was stalking him now. Kitu frightenedly knocked the blade away and exclaimed in surprise, how did he notice him? He answered that it was hunting instincts, a fairly common skill. The man became furious and ordered him to stop yelling. How could a low-level skill help him detect a high-ranking thief? Yukito gripped his sword tighter and asked, even if it was a lie, then what now? Will he tuck his tail between his legs like a dog and run away? His words provoked Kitu, and he, throwing off his cape, took out a weapon and ordered him to look at him. He was better than him. After these words, he pounced on him, and they grappled in a fight. MC blocked his blow, and then threw him away from himself, and mockingly said that he thinks this phrase should be left to the winner. What does he think? He didn't answer him and exclaimed, he only found it by relying on intuition? Let him stop lying. Yukito braced himself for another blow, and mentally he told him that he wasn't lying. This skill helps to detect danger around, but the chances that it will work are extremely small. In 99% of cases, the user will fail, but the probability is always on his side. Thanks to his luck, success is always guaranteed. And now, with the help of this skill, he saw literally everything. Kitu rushed towards him, noticing that he was quite fast for a hunter of his level, and he ran towards him, thanking him for the compliment. Despite the golems around, they began to fight among themselves, and the man said that despite this, he was still just a hunter, and he could not compare in dexterity with a thief, and of course, accurately. Smiling widely, he threw several quick punches, one of which wounded Yukito, but thanks to his luck, the poison didn't work. Kitu chuckled and noted that he seemed well prepared. He threw several punches, which he successfully blocked, and then he disappeared from his sight. Pushing off the golem, he jumped to the side and appeared behind him, then swung his sword, and just as he was about to strike, Kitu noticed this and jumped to the side, exclaiming that, even though he was well prepared, the situation didn't change. MC looked up at him and prepared his skill, then lunged forward, and Kitu laughed, asking, is this a guaranteed hit? He used his skill, turning into butterflies, and appeared behind him, leaving a doppelganger in his original place. Yukito was surprised that he missed him, while Kitu landed behind him and immediately rushed towards him, saying that guaranteed hit and perfect dodge. When two contrasting skills meet, the one with the higher level prevails. He swung his swords, hitting Yukito in the leg, causing him to tense up. Kitu laughed at him and exclaimed that a slow idiot like him would never catch him, while one of the golems finally decided to take action and fired a laser towards them. Kitu, without slowing down, immediately ducked and exclaimed that it was so cool. The golem aimed at him while he was busy, and MC jumped to the side, and then the man ran after him, saying that he easily dodged the boss's attacks because they were too predictable. You bought information about them from the guild too, right? Yukito blocked his blow and didn't answer this question, after which they exchanged a few more blows, and he suddenly felt pain. When he looked down, he noticed the traps scattered on the floor that he stepped on. Kitu was deliberately driving him here. He exclaimed that he couldn't escape his traps. After that, he chuckled and asked, he just realized it, right? Little tricks won't help him here. He pounced on him and, using his scorpion sting skill, shouted that his victory was sealed as soon as the fight began. MC tried to block his attack, but his opponent was so strong that he eventually couldn't take it anymore and was thrown back, causing him to hit his back against the wall and drop his weapon. His face darkened in an instant, and Kitu pounced on him, shouting that this was the end. And he, watching the two crossed blades heading for his neck, screamed loudly in horror. But in reality, he was only pretending. He stuck his tongue out at him with a smirk and said that he was making fun of him, and then pressed a special brick in the wall, and his opponent was trapped inside an impenetrable barrier. Kitu was very surprised. It was a gravity trap, and Yukito, raising his sword, asked, "Did he say that his tricks won't help? How will he explain what is happening to him then?" His opponent tried to ask something, but realized that he could not speak normally, and he said that all the information they know about this floor is taken from normal situations. Who would have thought that there would be an idiot who would get involved in a battle with another person's boss? Kitu began to guess, and at that moment, the ancient golem attacked Yukito, but he dodged and said that this is a double atypical raid and atypical bosses. He slid between the golem's legs, ending up behind him, and turned to his opponent with a smile asking, "He calls himself a thief, but he could not even notice the trap he fell into?" Kitu shouted that this is impossible, and looking at the golems approaching him, exclaimed that he is a hunter. "What is he doing?" The golem dealt him a powerful blow that forced him out of the trap and threw him into the wall with such force that cracks appeared on it. He fell to the ground and whispered that it hurts so much, after which the second golem picked him up and threw him to the floor with all its strength. He tried to move from the spot, but his body was so weak that it began to tremble. He was shocked that his skills that no one could detect before and the hidden traps he noticed so easily. MC said that he already told him that it was intuition. It was just that. The man cleared his throat, trying to get up, and Yukito went to the monsters and told him to lie down and rest for now. If he lived until the moment when he dealt with the monsters, then he would hand him over to the police. He prepared to fight two golems, and Kitu looked at him and in a rage sent him to hell. Hearing that he was still able to speak, MC turned around in surprise. Then the man laughed loudly, as if he was crazy, and shouted that he would take him to hell with him. He put several bundles of explosives on himself and exclaimed that this thing would be more powerful than those traps. Yukito, realizing what he was about to do, exclaimed, as he completely lost his mind. Laughing loudly, he used the explosives and wished him a quick death, after which a powerful explosion occurred. MC held his sword in front of him, trying to defend himself, and cracks appeared on the floor, and then it collapsed. The support under his feet disappeared in an instant, and he flew down, and a few seconds later he hit the floor with a dull thud. He grabbed his head, feeling terrible pain, and then looked up. It turns out that the explosion pierced several floors at once. The boss room was high, so he definitely could not go up now. He decided to look around to see where he was, and at that moment golems landed on both sides of him. He quickly looked around, realizing that he was surrounded, and noticed some kind of glow behind one of them. The light came out of the chest covered in gold and he grinned, realizing that he was in a secret room with treasures. Only this room was too small for maneuvering. In a fair fight, he would not be able to defeat two bosses at the same time, so this was a risk. He could only hope that the contents of the chest would save him. He rushed to the chest, deciding to run between the golem's legs, and it tried to grab him, but he jumped aside and, pushing off the wall, jumped over it, and at the same moment his wound on his leg made itself known. He landed on the golem, jumped down. The chest was very close, but his opponent was not going to let him get to it so easily. The golem quickly turned around and hit him with all its might with its hand, throwing him against the wall, and his sword flew to the side. Hitting his back, he took a lot of damage, but as long as his spine was intact, he would live. Looking up, he found that the golem was about to attack him again, this time with its foot. He hurried to run to the side, but did not have time. The golem stepped on him, and a sharp pain pierced the lower part of his body, which made him scream loudly. His legs were in terrible condition. He began to breathe heavily, trying to cope with the pain. He wanted to get up, but he did not feel his legs at all, and in rage he punched the floor, saying that he will not give up. The pain is so strong that he feels sick, but he has to do it. He crawled with all his might to the chest and the golem stepped on him again, causing another flash of pain. He screamed loudly, coughing up blood, and remembering his last moment before death. He thought that this pain was nothing compared to all the despair he had experienced in 70 years of life. Confidently raising his gaze, he continued to crawl towards the golden light and shouted that no suffering would break him anymore. Finally, he reached his goal, opened the chest, which contained a high-ranking bracelet. He smiled at his find, and at the same moment the golem rushed towards him, and the second decided to shoot a laser at him. He put the bracelet on his hand and smiled. This item is called the Bracelet of Variability, a rather rare thing that can move him to any point. This is exactly what he needed now. He decided to use it, and the golems were already very close. The system warned him that this magic item does not suit his class. The probability of activation is minus 50%. With every second, the golems were even closer, and the percentage of the probability of activation was decreasing. But Yukito's luck did its job, and he used the bracelet a second before he would have been crushed by the golem's huge body. The monster fell right on the chest, exposing its weak spot on its back, and MC took advantage of this. He teleported under the ceiling and jumped on the second golem from above, and struck with the thought that he simply had to win. Feeling the pain, the golem fired a laser towards the other, leaving a deep crack on the wall. And Yukito thought that this was hard. Even though the monster was hit by a laser, it was still alive, but he decided not to focus on this and used the bracelet, moving right onto the back of the lying golem, and thought that it was not the first time he was in such a difficult situation. He stuck his sword through the bars protecting the core, But before he could strike, the golem rose and he began to fall. Turning around, he saw the second monster heading towards him and already preparing to strike, and he used the bracelet again, teleporting behind him. He swung his sword at his back, forcing him to turn around and strike. But by this time, he had moved to the first golem again, and while the second one was looking for him in confusion, he aimed at its core and thought that he would fight as long as necessary, until his last breath. He struck the monster's core with his sword with all his might, and a squeak was heard. The golem immediately reacted to this and wanted to hit him, but by this time he had already teleported to the second golem and also hit its core. Seeing that it had cracked, he used teleportation again and struck the first monster. This went on for some time. He hit their cores in turn. At one point he stopped and teleported between them, and while he was falling, he thought that instead of praying for the desired 6 on the dice, he would just roll it until he got that 6. The golems immediately reacted. They both rushed towards him, and when there were only a few seconds left before the collision, he teleported again, causing them to collide, causing the cores to be heavily damaged. MC teleported behind the second golem and used his skill, dealing a critical hit to the core and splitting it into pieces. The other golem watched as he dealt with his entire comrade, and then Yukito teleported to him and, using the skill Storm of Blows, pounced on him, thinking that these stones would not break him. He quickly approached the enemy and delivered a sweeping blow, completely splitting his core. Now his strength was completely exhausted, and he began to fall, while the golems' bodies disintegrated into dust. The system reported that he had reached the limit of using the bracelet, and he fell onto the stone dust. The system reported that he had defeated 2 ancient golems, and therefore received legendary class items. Noticing a glow nearby, he turned his gaze to it. In front of him were 2 elixirs, the very ones he had been hunting for all this time. He took one of them and drank every last drop. As soon as the elixir spread throughout his body, he was illuminated by a bright color, and all his wounds began to heal. The shattered bones returned to normal. Even all traces of blood disappeared. After that, he lay on his back and looked at the light coming through the hole in the ceiling, and then at the second elixir and smiled, noting that by some miracle, he was still alive. The system informed him that for fulfilling all the conditions, he would be awarded the title of Survivor, which adds 10 points to defense, Slayer of 2 giants, which adds 20 points to strength, and Arbiter of the Law, which gives 10 points to agility. When he had rested for a while, he moved the elixir to his inventory and looked up, wondering how he could get back. He jumped high into the air and then began to push off the wall, slowly rising until he reached the desired floor. When he got to the top, he noticed a bloody cape nearby that was left by the guy, and he took it, thinking, is this enough evidence of a crime? After that, he headed to the door and opened it, and walked towards the exit of the dungeon with a smile. As soon as he was outside, he immediately headed to the guild and told them everything. His story scared the guild member very much and ran to call the boss. As he expected, the situation would cause a big stir. When her boss came, he told him that this incident needed to be covered in the news, so he asked him to stay so that they could conduct the interview, but MC still had plans. He apologized to him, saying that he was in a hurry, and suggested that he conduct the interview another day. After that, he ran home because he wanted to give his mother the elixir as soon as possible. All the passers-by on the street recognized him because right now he was shown on the news, saying that he set a record for passing 20 floors and defeated 2 bosses alone. But he did not pay attention to them at all and soon reached home. As soon as he opened the door, his sister and mother greeted him happily, and he showed them the elixir, smiling, saying that he was finally home. As soon as she took the elixir, they went to the hospital and took the necessary tests. Soon the results came. Yukito and Nozomi froze in anticipation in front of the doctor, and he smiled and told their mother that she was completely healthy. Her children were very happy, and they asked, "Is this true?" The doctor nodded and said that the effect of this elixir was simply incredible. Nozomi was so happy that she hugged her mother and burst into tears, saying that she was finally healthy, and she turned to her son and took his hand, saying that it was all thanks to him. She thanked him with a warm smile for everything, and he shuddered. After that, tears came to his eyes, and he thanked her for raising him and believing in him. Old, he felt relieved. He could finally tell her. His sister laughed at him because he burst into tears right in front of the doctor, but she was crying herself. Wiping away her tears, she noted that he could have said this at home, and he awkwardly laughed, agreeing with her. She smiled and said that her brother had never learned to see beyond his own nose over the years. For some reason, her voice became distorted, and time around stood still. Everything became somehow gloomy. A silhouette of a man appeared outside the window. He entered the doctor's office through the window and said that it was so sad to condemn such sincere and pure-hearted people to suffering. He was not even consoled by the fact that this action would take place within the walls of a hospital. He began to parody how they would react to all this, and with deliberate drama said that they did everything they could, but everything is not always enough. The family will not dig deeper, because the cause of her death will be an ordinary heart attack. He walked up to Nozomi and clenched his fist, then lunged at her, but MC didn't let him do it and blocked his strike with his sword, making him look surprised. After that, he exclaimed in rage, "What the hell is he doing?" He calmly told the men that it was so sudden. "Can he move?" Yukito was very furious. He insulted him and ordered him to answer a question. At that moment his face seemed terribly familiar to him. Right in front of him now stood the hero, the strongest of the adventurers and their savior, Oyama Kosamoraido. He winked at him, and said that his eyes were not deceiving him, then showed him his badge and said that he really was a hero. MC looked at him in confusion, saying that he didn't understand why a hero would do something like that, but Oyama didn't let him finish, saying that it was his turn to ask questions now. Only those who have tasted death can move into oblivion, and so there is only one option. He pointed his finger at him and asked, was he also reincarnated? Yukito frowned and asked what his words meant. Did he also live a second life? He smiled and confirmed it, saying that since he was not going to deny what he said, he would tell him everything now. He came here to eliminate the risk of the end of the world. MC turned to his sister and asked what she had to do with all of this. He said that she is one of the factors, or rather the negative effect that she could have on her future husband. That is why she needed to be gotten rid of. He was surprised and asked, so it was her future husband? He immediately remembered that guy, and Oyama said that he was a pretty important figure in their world. Their divorce had really hurt him, and that would be the root cause of the world's downfall. That is why he came today, to eliminate his sister. Now does he understand why he is doing this? He exclaimed in response that this timeline has nothing to do with the last one, and Oyama, not believing him, asked if that was true. To convince him, he pointed to his mother and exclaimed that in this timeline, he was able to cure her, so Nozomi wouldn't go to work at a nightclub to pay for the hospital bills, which meant she wouldn't meet her future husband, so killing his sister didn't make any sense. The man raised his hand to his chin thoughtfully and remarked that this theory was so interesting. However, instead of believing in theories, it was better to act on it. After saying this, he took out his sword and Yukito said that he wouldn't let him lay a finger on her. He told him that it was bad. If possible, he wouldn't want to kill him. After all, he only wanted to help people. One sacrifice for the sake of peace? Isn't that a worthy exchange? MC shook his head, saying that he wouldn't go back on his words, and Oyama said that he would too. A great idea struck him and he smiled and offered him to fight him, to prove his potential. He became nervous and asked why he would do something like that, and he noted that he was special. He wondered how much he was risking by making concessions to him. He let out a nervous laugh and asked if he was looking down on him, but that was to be expected from a hero. The man apologized to him and said that it was because he was actually higher than him. He showed him his stats. He was level 50, but all his stats were at 3000. He was very surprised to see this, and Oyama approached him, saying that there was nothing to talk about because the truth was stupidly simple. Without powers, he was unable to protect anything. He approached his face and looked threateningly into his eyes, saying that it did not matter whether it was about protecting the world or loved ones. The truth would be one. After that, he took a few steps back and said that this was the truth that everyone who had been reborn had experienced. He turned to him and swung his sword, saying that it was time for a choice. Either he would kill his sister right now, or he would accept his challenge. Yukito looked at him doubtfully and wondered what he should do. Should he use the bracelet and run away with them? But he would find them anyway, and he physically couldn't just stay with Nozomi for days, protecting her from possible danger. He took a deep breath, then pointed his sword at him and said that he agreed to fight him. Oyama smiled as if this was all he had been waiting for, and winked at him, telling him not to worry. He wouldn't be beating up the poor guy. Unfortunately, nothingness could only be used for a limited time. He took out a pocket watch from his inventory and said that he needed to hold out for 10 minutes, and if he could, he would win. He asked, so they would start right here? He told him that it was not so, after which, he jumped out of the window and said that he did not want to destroy the walls of such a bland hospital, and suggested that he find a more suitable place for their duel. MC ran to the window and watched him fall, then took one last look at his sister, and mentally told her that he would definitely protect her. After that, he jumped after the hero. They found themselves in a spacious square in the middle of a park, and Uyama said that this place would be perfect. Yukito chuckled, saying that he hoped he would not be lenient with him, and he told him that since he insisted so much, then he would do it. After these words, he snapped his fingers, summoned 5 magic circles at once, from which fire, stones, lightning, wind, and water poured out. MC was surprised that he started with this right away, and, dodging and simultaneously parrying the blows, noted that he didn't even give him time to prepare. Uyama smiled and told him that he was just getting started, then summoned his clones, making him nervous. He took the sword along with the clones, and rushed towards him, asking, "He is often surrounded by enemies, isn't he?" Yukito opened his inventory and exclaimed in response, "Does he think he is the only one who can do this?" He took out 2 replacement dolls that responded to the blows of the hero clones, and he clashed with the real one. Their swords crossed, then they increased the distance between them, and Oyama, looking at his battered doll, noted that it was weak. Does he understand that it is impossible to win just by defending? MC confirmed this, and taking out the Staff of Absurdity, created a huge meteor and answered him with a smile that he understood this perfectly well. He just needed time. He swung the staff, sending the meteor towards the enemy, followed by an explosion. He wasn't sure if it would kill him, but it would at least slow him down for a little while. But imagine his surprise when Uyama emerged from the cloud of smoke without a scratch, and said that he understood everything now. This was his gift that appeared during reincarnation. He has a barrier of nothingness, and he has great luck. Yukito clicked his tongue in annoyance. He dodged, putting his clone in danger. He smirked and noted that he could see right through him, but the man disagreed and said that he had concluded this based on his recent achievements. MC asked if he found it funny that he could achieve everything with luck. He told him that luck was as much a part of skill as strength or intelligence, but relying on it alone was unwise. The magic circles behind him grew larger, and he exclaimed that he would show him now. The spirits of the 4 elements emerged from the magic circles and stood behind him, ready to fight. Yukito said that he was right. It was stupid to rely only on luck all the time. He remembered that when he saw the hero's stats, he noticed something. His luck was abnormally low. He didn't want to do anything that would embarrass him in front of his loved ones. But now was not the time to think about that. It even scared him a little that he didn't doubt it for a second. However, he knew why. He was ready to do anything for them, just like they had once done for him. His opponent hoped that he was ready, after which he directed all his strength at him and said that the world was cruel and unfair, and it was time for him to come to terms with this reality. The spirits of fire and water attacked simultaneously, and MC meanwhile decided to take advantage of his failure to defeat him and put on the bracelet. The system warned him again about the low probability of activation, but luck did its job, and he began to watch as streams of fire and water quickly approached him. Having waited for the right moment, he teleported, finding himself in the middle of a busy street. Uyama quickly caught up with him and noted that he had a pretty useful thing, but his flight magic was enough for him. Yukito stood in the middle of the crowd and apologized to him, saying that they would continue fighting here. Since he decided to test him, he wanted to test him in return. A hero wouldn't involve innocent people, would he? Oyama understood what he was planning and said with a smile that it was interesting. Indeed, he was a hero, and his duty was to protect people, not to harm them. He snapped his fingers, calling off the spirits, and put away his sword, saying that he would not use mass magic and a sword would not work either. After that, he spread his arms out to the sides and, raising the glowing spears behind his back, told him not to worry, that it would not stop him from defeating him. MC in response also put away his sword and took out a shield, after which he stood in a stance, showing that he was ready. Oyama waved his hand, pointed the spears at him, and said that he felt nostalgic. In his past life, he often fought enemies who used the crowd as a shield. The spears accurately hit Yukito, going around the people, and he quickly made his way through the crowd, dodging the blows, and ran into an alley. He stopped to reflect the spear, and it flew to the side, leaving a deep hole in the wall of the building, and even perforated a gas pipe. Oyama landed nearby and said that the monsters in the guise of people, scoundrels who sow lawlessness in the city, are becoming more and more. He crouched and touched the ground with his hand, growing sharp stones in the alley, but MC was able to dodge. He ran further and, running out of the alley, jumped over cars and hid behind a truck, saying that he spent most of his life burning in the dungeons, so the city was just a place where he could get food. Because of this, he doesn't remember much about his past life. Oyama teleported to him and said that he was sad to hear this. He wanted to remember his past life with someone who lived the same as him. He flew up to him to strike him, but he hid under the truck and said that he didn't want to remember anything. His past life was like the life of a worm who mercilessly tried to crawl on the ground. Oyama kicked the truck and exclaimed that then he should be grateful for the chance to live a second life. MC didn't expect this. He barely blocked his blow with his shield, but because of this, he was thrown out from under the truck and hit his back against the wall. Standing up, he told him that he was the type to be comfortable in tight spaces, and his opponent shrugged with a smile, saying that he didn't know he was fighting a coward. Yukito took the skateboard that was nearby and skated forward down the street, smiling, telling him to say whatever he wanted, but he wouldn't change himself. Watching his silhouette recede, Uyama scratched his head in confusion and asked, "Did he run away again?" He sighed tiredly and said that he was starting to get tired of this. After all, he asked him to prove himself worthy, but he wasn't ready to accept a coward who would always run away. He drew a star in the air with his finger, and a huge net appeared in front of MC, preventing him from going any further. He jumped off the skateboard, and Oyama quickly approached him, saying that if this was all he could do, then the battle was over. Yukito looked to the side. He noticed a utility pole nearby and said with a smile that he understood everything. Then he approached and kicked it, surprising his opponent. And when the pole cracked and began to fall, he said with a smile that it was time to act. Seeing that it was falling right on him, Uyama became excited and, looking at the car behind him, noted that he did everything so that he could not even dodge. He caught the pole, and MC applauded him, saying that this was expected of a brave hero. He will do everything to ensure that innocents do not get hurt. He threw the pole aside and confirmed this, saying that it goes without saying. He admits that it surprised him a little. Yukito chuckled at his words, then cut the wires and said that since this is the case, he is obliged to protect them at all costs. Seeing the charged wires swinging randomly from side to side, he became very nervous. And when these wires swung and reached the building, the wall of which he had recently pierced with a spear, The current touched the gas pipes and an explosion occurred. Hearing a deafening noise behind him, the hero turned around excitedly and, seeing that the building was burning, ordered his spirit Undyne to put out the fire. In an instant, she appeared next to the building and began to release water, and MC shouted that more water would be needed. The explosion affected not only the building, but also the trees around, and now the flames were spreading quickly. At some point, even the asphalt cracked, and cars began to fall into the ground. The hero smiled nervously and exclaimed, "Is he making fun of him?" He called on his spirits, the sylph and the gnome, and was about to give them orders, but deciding that they alone would not be enough, he also ran to eliminate the destruction. The gnome quickly got people out from under the ground, and the sylph lifted the cars with the wind. While they were working together, Yukito approached his opponent and asked if he had forgotten about him. Ignoring him, he exclaimed that he didn't have time for him right now, and he simply wasn't capable of causing him any damage. He told him that maybe he wasn't capable, but he could arrange the circumstances to cause him harm. He ran up and pushed him in the back with his shield with all his might, causing him to fall off the cliff, and exclaimed, "Did he decide to throw him right into the sewer?" He reached out his hand, trying to grab onto it, and MC asked, "Isn't that ironic? The best of the best ended up at the bottom. At least he'll understand what it's like." He swung his sword, preventing him from grabbing onto it, and he looked at him in fear, then fell into the sewer pit. He was extremely indignant that he dared to do such a thing to him, and Yukito, pointing the staff of absurdity at him, said that he was not finished with him yet. Oyama raised his hands and asked him to stop. He gave up. After that, they sat on the roof of the truck to talk. As Oyama wrung out his clothes and the gnome helped him dry, he said that due to his low luck, he often encountered something like this. He supposed that this could happen in their duel, too, but he did not expect such a rout. This is the first time so many misfortunes happened to him at once. He smiled and noted that all these explosions are just like that accident. He remembers, right? MC confirmed this and remembered how the highest floor of the building exploded, and then everyone brought food and flowers to this place to remember the dead. He came to this place, prayed, and ate all this food. Surprisingly, the painful memories from the past came in handy for his victory. He decided to get back to business and asked the hero if he could prove to him that he was able to prevent the past from repeating itself. He joyfully clapped his hands and said that he had more than proven it. After that, he jumped off the truck and said that he would let him stay with her a little longer. Yukito looked at him in bewilderment, and he, stretching his shoulders, said that, unfortunately, the nothingness would soon subside, and he would have to deal with all these consequences. He would have to go back to the hospital and deal with the curse of the disaster. MC did not understand what he was talking about at all and asked what curse. Oyama was surprised by his question and said that this was the reason for the tragedy in that hospital. How could he not know about it if he came from the future? Yukito jumped down to him and said that this was the first time he heard about it. He said with a smile that this was not a funny joke. He said with a serious expression that he seriously did not understand what he was talking about. He was even more surprised by this and asked loudly, he really did not know about this disaster? He did not remember the fires and the destroyed roads? He said with a confused look that he spent his entire past life in the dungeons. He crossed his arms with a serious expression and said that meant that he did not remember everything from his past life. In that case, he did not know how to resist the curse. He said that he had no idea. He said that he did not have time to explain everything to him anyway. The nothingness would subside very soon. He should go to the morgue. It is in the basement of the hospital. When he gets there, he will understand everything. He looked at him with distrust and asked why he should listen to him. He began to warm up his hands and said that he will try to make it in time and figure it out himself. But if nothing is done, many people will die. Immediately after that, he took off very quickly, and the protagonist asked him to stop. He said with a slightly dissatisfied look that he did not understand what was happening, but it was better to return to the hospital. He used his bracelet and teleported. At the hospital, the doctor said that the only thing he could recommend them to undergo regular examinations. Yuki agreed, thanked him, and said that she would follow his recommendations. He nodded and looked at them with a slightly worried look. He thought that he did not have time to explain, since he himself did not fully understand what could happen. He left the office and thought that the only thing he knew was that they could not stay in the hospital. He should quickly get them out of here. Nozomi said with a happy look that she was so nervous that she wanted to eat. Mom asked with a small smile if they could stop by a cafe on the way home. He refused and said that for such an occasion he would cook them dinner himself. They were surprised because of this and asked if he would cook. It was so rare. He asked with a smile that he only had one request. Could they go to the store and buy everything for dinner? She asked if he wanted to spoil them. How could they refuse him? She said with a smile that if Mom didn't mind, then she didn't mind either. When they left, he turned around and thought that now it was time for him to check the morgue. He went to the men's room, where he put on his cloak and thought that it was the loot for defeating Kitu. He put it on to avoid meeting all sorts of weak monsters, He didn't think that he would need it for such an occasion. However, he somehow doesn't want to check the veracity of the hero's words. When he came out of the toilet, the guy got scared and thought there was a ghost here. MC went into the elevator and thought he had never heard of the curse of the disaster. He said that when he came to the morgue, he would understand everything. He went down to the right floor and thought it was very quiet here. There must be something here that would cause the disaster. First, he would check if there was anyone alive on the floor. He took out his sword, looked at the radar, but there was no one nearby. He walked a little further, found the morgue and looked inside. He went further and said that there was a high probability that he too would end up among them one day. He turned around and thought that in the end, he found nothing. Maybe he decided to joke about him? At that moment, he heard a loud sound that came from next to him. Many of these people began to get up from their beds and walk towards him. He raised his sword with a small smile and said that everything really became clear. He covered his face with his sleeve and thought, is this seriously a zombie? Usually, the strongest adventurers challenge the floor with the undead. He looked at it and thought that this was not some kind of zombie virus, but most likely the effects of a curse. If an adventurer was cursed before death and was not buried after a certain period of time, he becomes a zombie. The curse can also spread to nearby corpses. In their past lives, the souls of the dead were packed with holy power. But in the current life, such a method has not yet been mastered. It's good that the curse does not spread to the living, unless they are bitten by zombies, so you have to be extremely careful. He continued to kill monsters and placed beds in such a way as to block their passage. He thought that he was able to reduce their numbers a little. He looked at the badge on one of the zombies and thought that he must have been a famous adventurer in life. However, in the end, he became a walking dead. He heard sounds behind him, turned around and asked, is someone trying to get in? There were 2 zombies. He turned around abruptly and thought that this would be easy. He killed one zombie, swung his sword and was about to attack, but stopped. He looked at the radar and thought that she was marked as a neutral target. So, she hasn't been converted yet? The girl looked at him with tears in her eyes and loudly asked him for help. He was surprised by what he heard and asked, is she still alive? She must be an employee of the funeral home who came to pick up the bodies. He thought that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't turn a zombie back into a human. However, if she was bitten recently, then there was a chance to escape. However, he didn't have the necessary tools to help. Besides, the barricade wouldn't hold out for long. Letting her die would be the most logical decision, and he should focus on eliminating the main threat. He opened his inventory and said that he didn't want to be a hero who was driven only by efficiency. The system notified that the bracelet of variability was being used. He thought that alchemical tools would be needed to heal her. All that was left was to get the blood of the one who would drink the potion. He came back after he had bought everything and thought that even he knew he was trying too hard. He took her hand, made a small cut on her finger, and dripped her blood into the flask. He took out everything he needed and said that now all the ingredients were collected. He did everything necessary, and the system notified that the production of the sacred elixir of purification was beginning. Warning, his alchemy proficiency is insufficient. The activation probability is 25%. No advanced synthesis skill. The activation probability is 70%. Insufficient magic skills. The available activation quality in percentage terms, high 1%, medium 2%, low 97%. The production of high-quality sacred purification is complete. He took the elixir and said that she should be patient for a little while longer. He gave her this elixir to drink and she immediately felt better. He sighed in relief and said that this was excellent. He carried her to the side and sat her down against the wall. He took his sword in his hand and said that now was the time to deal with the zombies. He was a little confused when he didn't see them and asked where they were and why it was so quiet. He was very surprised when he noticed that the zombies were gathering in one place and they were united by a black liquid. The monster finished forming and let out a very loud scream. It struck with its tentacle and scattered his barricades. Yukito looked at it with a shocked look and asked, what the hell was that? He thought that while he was gone, the curse had united and become stronger. Is this the price for showing compassion to others? If the hero knew about this, he would laugh in his face with all his heart. He ran towards the monster and said that, however, he did not regret what he had done for a second. The monster tried to attack him with a tentacle, but he was able to dodge. Running close enough, he struck with his sword very hard and cut off its head. He thought that in order to kill a zombie, he need to get rid of its head. However, after that, the monster did not die and attacked again with a tentacle. He struck again and thought that this monster had many heads. He struck 2 quick blows with his sword and cut off the tentacles that were attacking him. He ran closer again, struck with his sword, and thought that, however, the tactics were still the same. He continued to attack with his sword and thought that he just needed to cut off the heads until there were none left. He cut off the last head and said that now he would turn into a pile of corpses. Unexpectedly for him, the monster began to transform again, and he had a new head. The monster screamed loudly and released several tentacles, with which he grabbed the bodies of zombies lying nearby. He began to swallow these bodies, and the protagonist looked at this and asked, is he healing? Any other zombie would have already turned into rot. He looked at what was happening and thought that he understood one thing. He needed to have time to cut off the last head before he had time to restore the others. But the warrior's skills are focused on fighting the enemy face to face, and he doesn't have ranged combat skills. He can resort to the power of the staff, but then he will most likely destroy the hospital. Maybe buy some time and wait for the hero? But I don't want to lose to this pompous blonde. In any case, I can't wait until he arrives. The rest of the zombies approached this monster and climbed inside. He looked at this huge monster and thought that by that time, this creature would grow to unimaginable sizes. The monster screamed loudly and struck with its tentacle. The monster continued to attack with its tentacles and destroyed the walls of the morgue. He thought with a serious expression that he needed to deal with it himself. If it continued to eat its own kind, then very soon no one would be able to stop it. However, how should he fight it? He needed a thing that could destroy all the zombies at once. However, it would not be powerful enough to destroy the entire hospital. He didn't have one at hand yet. He turned around and looked at the alchemical tools he had recently bought. He used his sword to cut the tentacles that were flying towards him and thought that an alchemical set could be used for more than just making medicine. He hid behind the bed and the monster attacked it. He looked at the monster with a smirk and said that if he doesn't have something, he just needs to make it. He looked around and thought that in a critical situation, even a pipe or a stone could be a useful weapon for him. The monster struck very hard with a tentacle and cut the bed he was hiding behind. He looked at the monster with a smirk and said that he was so impatient. He put the steel plate back in his inventory and looked at it. He took out his shield and said that he was a zombie, so he should be a little slower and dumber. He started running away and blocked attacks with tentacles. He took out a book and found a recipe for black gunpowder. He read the necessary ingredients and wondered where he would find all this in the morgue. He could use the bracelet and teleport to the store, but he was completely out of energy. The bracelet was cracking, and he thought that he had been using this non-stop all day. What if he created the ingredients himself? He noticed a wooden box and thought that he needed regular wood first. The system notified that he had received cedar wood. He threw it into the cauldron, and the system notified that the creation of charcoal had begun. Warning: alchemy cannot help create this ingredient. The success rate is 25%. Not enough magic skills. The available quality of activation in percentage: high 2%, medium 3%, low 95%. High quality charcoal production completed. MC started looking around and thought that there was sulfur and potassium nitrate left. He threw the flask with the potion at the monster and wondered how to even make this. He took out his phone and thought that he was disoriented. It was high time to turn to the power of the internet. He found the information he needed and thought that he needed matches. The incense in the sensor was lit by something, right? He looked at the bag of the girl he saved and found matches. He threw it into the cauldron and said that all that was left was to extract the necessary components from it. He managed to create sulfur and potassium nitrate and thought that now he needed to create black gunpowder. The system notified that the production of high-quality black gunpowder was complete. Using the trolley legs and black gunpowder to create high-quality bullets, he took a notebook and began to write something down with a small smile. The monster came to his senses after the effect of the elixir wore off and screamed very angrily. He looked at this monster with a grin and asked, what was the most effective weapon against zombies? He opened his inventory and threw the sheet of paper with the weapon drawing into the cauldron. He threw the remaining trolley legs into the cauldron, and the system notified that the creation of a new recipe was starting. Warning: due to the lack of metallurgy skills, which will negatively affect the quality of the thing. Not enough magic skills. Available quality of activation in percentage: high 0.01%, average 0.99%, low 99%. Manufacturing of homemade sawed-off high-quality shotgun completed. He walked towards this monster and said that he did not want to desecrate the corpses of the killed hunters, but he could not do anything. The system notified that loading the weapon with black powder bullets was complete. He pointed the weapon at the monster with a smile and said that he would kill them again. The system notified that his class does not assume the use of firearms. The chance of weapon explosion increased by 30%. Accuracy decreased by 30%. He fired his weapon, and the system notified that shooting was successfully mastered. He hit the monster several times, and each of his shots was critical. The monster suffered greatly because of this, but quickly began to recover. He shot the monster in the head again and said that he did not even have to think about it. He kept shooting non-stop, but the monster survived it, and he said that he was so stubborn. However, he was also quite persistent. The monster fell to the ground but tried to get up, and Yukito kept shooting until the system notified that there were no more bullets. He stepped on this monster, and the system notified that he had destroyed the curse of disaster. He was the first in the world to destroy such a creature. He was given the title of Holy Assassin. Damage against the undead was increased by 30%. He closed his eyes and said that it was finally over. At that moment, the girl he saved came to her senses, and this caught his attention. He turned to her and said that the medicine still worked. He was very happy. He thought, how was he going to explain the fact that he was here? He was not a hospital employee. He was covered in blood, and he had a gun with him. He put the gun away in his inventory and thought that if he told the truth, no one would believe him. Moreover, he entered a place where only hospital employees are allowed to enter. In addition, He used a weapon outside the dungeon. First, he needs to put on a cloak. There was a knock on the door and the man said loudly that they should activate the locators and check if anyone is here. He put on the hood and thought that someone had already arrived. Things were bad. His stealth skills were limited. After all, he was a warrior class and he had almost no energy left. He really hoped that it would transport him from here one last time. He pressed the bracelet and thought that it was not working. Everything was not going as smoothly as he would like. Several paladins entered the morgue and brought in a chair with a girl sitting on it. He looked at them and thought that the only thing he needed was clerics. One of them pointed his sword at him and loudly said to Ms. Naomi that there was a suspicious man here. She looked at the phone screen with a calm expression on her face and asked, "Is he an enemy of God?" He said loudly that he did not know this, but he looked suspicious. She threw him the phone and said that he should go through the raid for her for now. She came down, folded her hands in prayer and said that the kingdom of heaven should bring his servant more item. May she not meet destruction from immoral donors. She opened her eyes and looked at him with a serious expression. She walked up to him and asked with a calm expression, "So, is he an enemy of God?" The protagonist took off his hood, and she refused and said that most likely he was the one who killed those rebels. However, how did he know about this? She began to examine him from different angles and said that he did not look like a hospital employee. He senses the rebels better than she does, and how is that? He was about to say something, but Uyama came to them and said that he sensed the impending danger and sent him here. She bowed to him and said that this was the master hero himself. He winked with a kind smile and said that he had to deal with the accidents in the city, not being able to be present here and there, so he asked him for help. Naomi looked at him and said that that's it. He was the one who asked him for this. Since he is familiar with the hero himself, she sees no reason to be suspicious. Plus, his karma is pretty low. He was a little surprised by this and said that it was the first time he heard of such a characteristic. She said with a smug look that she is able to see other people's sins, good and bad deeds in numerical values. Oyama clapped his hands and said that as expected of the youngest novice of the church. He looked at her and thought that that means she has a rare skill that is tied to one field of activity. She told Lord Hero that it is not worth it. Will this youth really take part in the upcoming holy battle? They looked at him for a few seconds, after which she turned to the hero and he said with a smile that of course it is so. He will be very useful to her. He will cleanse the walls of the temple from the shackles of evil, bringing God's grace. They did not pay attention to him, and Naomi said that since the Lord Hero himself recommends him, he will go with her. She does not care who will be in her service, as long as he brings benefit. MC got angry because of this and asked if anyone in this room would ask his opinion or not. He walked up to him, laughed with a smile, and said that he was such a joker. He quietly said with a serious expression that they needed to step away and talk. They stepped away from the others. He apologized and asked if he could watch over her for him. It seems that he has heard about the temple class change, right? He thought that the temple class change was a useful thing for adventurers. If he wants to develop his class or vice versa, change his temple, it will help him with that. Uyama said that in his past life, he was unable to save the temple because of the incipient disaster. Because of the temple's fall, the adventurers became weaker, while the enemy's strength increased. He said that since he knows about what will happen, he should take care of it himself. He said that he would love to, but he can't. There are still many threats in this world that he must prevent for the sake of a peaceful future. Yukito looked at him with displeasure and asked, "What does this have to do with him?" He snapped his fingers and said that he should think about it in the long term. By contacting the church, he will be able to go deeper into the dungeons. With instant teleportation between floors and powerful barriers, he thought about it and thought that the church has monopolized everyone who can use healing and support magic. They can create powerful barriers in certain areas and move adventurers with teleportation magic between floors. He still agreed, and Oyama asked with a surprised expression, did he really agree? He walked up to him, grabbed the edge of his cloak and said that in exchange, he must swear that he will not lay a finger on his family. He agreed and said that he does not intend to harm those who are useful to this world. He let him go and asked, so he will get rid of him once he is no longer useful to him? He said that his words sounded like he was threatening him. In fact, he was just asking for a little help. He said that, however, he should at least tell him what he was signing up for. He agreed and told him about it. They returned to Naomi and she asked if they had finished their conversation. Uyama agreed and said that he apologized for the wait. She said that everything was fine. They were still cleaning the place from filth. She pointed her spear at the protagonist and used magic to cleanse his clothes from blood. She jumped on a chair and said that they would now go to the nearest temple. He looked at her and asked what they were doing this for. She reached out to take the phone and said that it was needed to evaluate his abilities. There was no point in hiring a person who was not even capable of fighting. The paladins pointed their weapons at him and he immediately turned around. Uyama left the room very quickly, wished him luck and said that they can safely check him and it is time for him to go. He thought with a displeased look that he had simply dumped him. He said with a slightly confused look that apparently he will not be able to eat lunch today. After some time, They came to the temple, and he took out his sword. Naomi clapped her hands and said that so, they can begin. His opponent will be an average subordinate. He is about level 40. His opponent took out his sword, and he thought that his level is slightly higher than his. She announced the start of the fight, and they immediately ran towards each other. She began to eat bread crusts, and watched this. They crossed swords, and MC thought that for some reason he hits with a sword rather weakly. Warriors of the church, of course, are more focused on defensive skills. However, even so, with the difference in levels, it seems that he fights even worse than him. She finished eating and channeled energy into her staff and said that it was good. Now she would show him a glimpse of God's grace. She cast a spell, and with it, the warrior's energy increased. He ran up to him very quickly and started attacking, and he blocked those attacks with his sword and thought that he was moving much faster and more aggressively now. She cast a buff on him. Church warriors already have high stamina and defense. However, with strength buffs, he would not be able to withstand a protracted fight. His attention was drawn to the knight's glove, and he thought that his armor was very flimsy. He dodged his opponent's attack and took out his shield and thought that it would be a sin not to use it. He took out some metal slag and thought that this junk seemed to work. While he was distracted, his opponent jumped high in the air, channeled energy into his weapon, and used the Holy Hammer skill. He channeled energy into the thing in his hand, used the Bee Sting skill, and jumped towards him. He threw the metal slag with great force, hitting the gauntlet and breaking part of the armor. He struck with his shield, causing the paladin to feel great pain in his hands and drop his weapon. They fell to the ground, but he took his sword and pointed it at him. He asked with a smirk if he should continue. Naomi clapped her hands and said that it was enough. He was quite strong. Yukito handed the paladin his sword with the hilt facing him, thanked her, and thought that it wasn't that he was strong. They just relied too much on buffs. She took out her phone and said that they would meet later and that he could go now. He turned around, agreed, and said goodbye to her. After a while, he returned home and cooked food for his family. He gave his sister and mother the well-made food, kept the burnt one for himself, and wished them a pleasant appetite with a confused look. She called Nozomi with a smile and asked if they should at least try it. Her brother had tried so hard for them after all. She agreed with this and wished her a pleasant appetite. He looked at them with a smile and thought that his mother had finally recovered. He was able to do what he couldn't do in his previous life. They have enough money, so his sister can enjoy her youth. However, it's not a fact that the day won't come when the hero won't need him anymore, and he'll break his word. Until that day, he has to become stronger than him. He started eating, and she asked her brother if it would be better if he didn't eat it. He said that burnt rice was delicious. He thought that, however, as long as he wasn't a threat to him, he needed to sort out the situation at the temple first. After some time, Naomi looked at the messages on the forum with a displeased expression on her face and thought that they were completely incomprehensible. She preaches to people who are quite far from faith, but they all want to see a sign, a token, and are ready to believe only when they see the result with their own eyes. Indulging in worldly things, people only spoil their karma. In the gacha, she pressed the button, but was upset by what she saw, slammed the phone on the table, and loudly said that she cursed this greedy donation dump. There was a knock on her office door, and a paladin asked if they could come in. She gave her permission. Several paladins entered, and one of them said that he apologized for disturbing her. She asked if something was wrong. He knelt down and said that he needed to discuss the upcoming holy battle with her. She asked with a slightly confused look, "What's wrong with this?" He said that they were categorically against including an adventurer in their expedition. After all, she had seen his karma herself. It was too dangerous for all of them. Naomi thought with a slightly displeased look that they were talking about this again. To be honest, she didn't care about it. All she wanted was to delve deeper into her faith and purify her heart. However, belonging to the temple inevitably includes showdowns within it. The paladin said that she herself knew that the participation of adventurers did not lead to anything good. She put on her monocle with a calm expression and said that it was so. The temple carefully studied such situations and came to the general conclusion that groups with a high reputation have a much higher chance of survival. Therefore, the temple introduced a hidden parameter evaluating karma. The strength of the god's enemies now depends on it. The paladin agreed and said that therefore only they, the servants of the god with high karma, have the right to fight. She said that, however, she would notice that the hero himself had warned them that relying on karma alone. She didn't have time to finish because he slammed his hand on the table and said that even if karma was unreliable, she had to face the truth. Those dissolute adventurers and they, the servants of God, leading a righteous life, who of them was more worthy of bringing peace to this world? He held out the documents and said that among those adventurers, there were actors, criminals. She said with a small smile that there was some truth in their words. However, she had already given her word that she would take the adventurer into her service, and she did not intend to go back on her word. He asked, however, she had not given her word to fight together, right? She sighed and said that she understood him. Since they insisted so much, the adventurers would not participate in the holy battle. She will do everything possible to free the temple from the clutches of evil and vice. They all knelt down and he said that they were grateful to her, They left the office, and he said with a joyful look that the lady listened to their pleas. They thought that a child who is not interested in politics can be so easily deceived. Children are very easy to manipulate. They said that this is as befits a saint. They themselves must protect the innocent from the enemies of God. They thought that they cannot allow the hero to be exalted even more. It is necessary to get more subsidies from the temple. They all raised their hands and said that they must serve the Lord today too. After some time, the protagonist stood outside, looking at his phone, and thought that before he could even blink, the day of the holy battle had arrived. He never met with this girl to discuss strategy. Naomi wrote to him that her subordinates would explain everything on the day of the battle. He wrote that, however, it would be better for them, the other adventurers, to know their plans in advance. He signed the document and thought that he was appointed the leader of the adventurers. He was kind of responsible for everyone. He teleported, and the system notified that this was the Tokyo dungeon, the first floor of the indelible mark. They met. He waved his hand and greeted her. She turned to him, bowed, and wished him good morning. His attention was drawn to the paladins who were standing behind her and silently looking at him. He thought that for some reason he had a bad feeling. After some time, he met with the adventurers, apologized, and said that they were probably upset because an outsider became the leader. He thought that all the local adventurers had been working for the temple for many days, unlike him. They reacted calmly to this and said that he should not worry so much because he was chosen by the hero himself. That's right. She's so grateful to Mr. Hero. That got his attention, and he asked her what she meant. The guy said that if it weren't for him, they would all be rotting in a prison cell long ago. MC thought with a calm expression that this pompous blonde guy shows himself every day as a model hero. In fact, he dumps all the dirty work on him. Naomi raised her spear and said that since everyone is gathered to begin their sacred mission, they are heading to the temple on the 30th floor. They reached the temple on the first floor, and he thought that the church built temples on each level of the dungeon, and this is considered a safe zone. There they can offer all sorts of services that usually cost a lot of donations. On the first floor, the temple is in ruins, which is not surprising. After all, who might need their services at the very beginning of the journey? They stood in a magic circle. The nun read a spell, and they were teleported. They walked out of the temple, and the system announced that this was the 30th floor of the Tokyo dungeon, the endless polar night. He thought with a calm expression that this was the floor illuminated by the dim light of the aurora borealis. There were almost no monsters, few resources, and strangely enough, there was not even a boss, so they could head to the next floor right away. At this time, the adventurers ignored the existence of the 30th floor. They stopped in front of the temple, shrouded in dark energy, and he asked what their plan was to take the temple. Naomi pointed her finger and said that their task was to defeat all the monsters that had settled within the sacred walls. The adventurers would stay here until the assault was over. They were surprised by what they heard, and he asked what that meant. The paladin said that they should not take it to heart. However, due to their karma, fighting the demons would be dangerous for all of them. They should let them deal with it themselves. Yukito thought with a displeased expression that the hero did not warn him about this. Uyama had said earlier that karma was one of the most unreliable indicators. There were many loopholes to lower his karma, which was used by all sorts of hypocrites who had settled in the temple. These same people were manipulating it for their dirty purposes. He said with a smirk that he should kill them and be done with it. He said that if many people from the temple died at once, there would be a great commotion. He asked, was it really that bad? Currently, he said that they, adventurers, had their obligations to the guild. They could not fulfill their duty haphazardly. It would harm their own reputation. The paladins pointed at her with their hands and said that they could rely on their mistress. She would inform the guild that they had fulfilled their duty 100% and would receive the promised reward. However, if anyone is against this arrangement, they are not holding anyone back. He took the document from him and said with a smile that it was so generous of the temple to pay the full amount for a job that was not even done. He hid his displeasure behind this smile and thought that in the end, the adventurers were just reinforcements. They had no say in this matter. The paladins called the mistress and said that they must begin a holy battle. They needed to combine their strength to defeat the enemy of God. She turned around with an uncertain expression and said that they had to go. They went into the temple, and the confused adventurers asked what they should do now. What is there to think about? It can be said that they did their job. However, is it okay to be paid for nothing? The protagonist thought that he knew the future and that their party would die. However, he couldn't ask the adventurers to save them. He looked up with a displeased expression and wondered what he should do. At the same time, Naomi and her party entered the temple where they saw many monsters near the statue. They walked further, and she wondered if the monsters were attacking them. They had hardly met them on this floor. Could it be? She didn't have time to finish her thought because two paladins ran towards them and said that the monsters still hadn't paid attention to them and were standing with their backs turned. They needed to kill them before they turned around. They were about to say something else, but suddenly the statue's mouth opened and dark energy was visible from there. Wings of dark energy appeared behind the statue's back, which surprised the paladins very much. They looked at it and loudly asked why the enemy of God had appeared here. They, as servants of God with a pure soul, shouldn't have encountered evil. Could there really be a person with low karma among them? They began to worry and thought that he was spending the company's money, so it didn't count. His money is evil. But when it is given to him as a gift, there's nothing to worry about. Fornication is a sin, but divorce and remarriage are normal. If the saint finds out about his true nature, he is finished. The rest are also unlikely to keep the faith. So one small sin will not spoil anything unexpectedly for them. Naomi said that it meant that the master hero was right after all. The monsters turned to them, and she said that they would leave the search for the culprit for later. They needed to focus on the enemy in front of them. They agreed and said that the mistress was right. As long as the mistress was on their side, they were not afraid of anyone. She channeled energy into her spear and cast a buff on the paladins, who began to fight. One of the monsters began to attack them with fireballs, which surprised them very much. They loudly said that these were unusual monsters. They were very different from those they had met before. She continued to use magic with a serious expression and said that they should not rush to conclusions. They were all monsters that inhabited the 30th floor. They, the ones who reached the 40th floor, would be able to defeat them. She began to heal the paladins, and they loudly said that she was right. They were much stronger than them. They ran to attack and began to attack the monsters. The statue continued to emit dark energy, causing the monsters to become stronger. They were surprised by what happened and loudly said that something was strengthening them. He had never seen anything like this before. Naomi thought with a worried look that with each adventurer she saved, her divine essence was getting stronger and her power was growing. Is it really true that people aren't the only ones who gain new skills by leveling up? The strengthened monsters quickly ran towards them. The paladins were unable to fight back and the monsters began to defeat them one by one. She gritted her teeth with a very worried look, continued to use magic and thought that these monsters seemed to be intentionally doing everything just to drain her mana. The paladins began to worry and asked, will they definitely win? The statue grew long horns. She noticed it and wondered, is it getting stronger because of fear and doubt? She closed her eyes, tried to calm down, and said that without a sacrifice they cannot win. Let this place become her altar. She uses the magic of redemption. They must cut a path to the statue of the goddess. She will give all her strength, up to the last drop of blood. All the paladins ran to attack and said loudly that they must show the enemies of the Lord the power of their faith. They tried to fight against the monsters, but some of them failed and were killed. The others were very scared when they saw the evil monsters looking at them. They started running to the exit, loudly calling for help, and said that he did not want to die. She turned to them and said with a displeased look that they should immediately return to the line. They did not listen to her, tried to open the door of the temple, and loudly said that she should shut up. No gods will save them from death. Naomi, with a worried look, thought, why did these people so easily turn away from God? And she is ready to sacrifice her life. She lowered her head with a sad expression and thought that although she also does not want to die in vain. At the same time, MC was standing outside and thought that he is not good at manipulation and persuasion. Maybe simple honesty will work. He said that although they actually fulfilled the request, he still asks them to help cleanse the temple. He doesn't have time to go back to the guild and create a cleansing request, so they can take this as a personal request. The adventurers said that since the hero chose him, he would hardly try to deceive anyone. However, why would he help these church ministers? He said that he personally didn't care, but Sir Hero, it was not for nothing that he sent him to help them. Besides, he doesn't want to leave the poor naive child among vile adults. The adventurer said with small smiles that he understands him. Since the hero sent him here, they will help. She also doesn't care about these paladins, but as for the girl, she would like her to be safe. He was glad that they agreed to help and thanked them for it. After that, they all walked together to the doors of the temple. He looked back and thought that in the end, no one left. The hero's popularity played into his hands. He turned around and said that he hoped that they were all ready. He opens the door. Suddenly, they all felt a very powerful dark energy. They activated the radar and saw many hostile creatures. The adventurers became worried about this and said that even though the door was closed, they could feel a murderous aura floating inside. No amount of money was worth the risk. Several adventurers left and apologized for this. Yukito looked at them and thought that half of them had left. However, would the rest stay? He couldn't blame them if they decided to leave. After all, if it weren't for the fear for Nozomi's life, he himself wasn't sure he would have entered. The adventurers called him the leader and said that at times like this, a smile was especially important. You need to create a winning attitude. He smiled and said that they were right. He opened the door and the paladins fell out, running away. He kicked one of them in the head, greeted them and asked, it seems like they're having trouble here, right? Naomi turned to them with a scared expression when she heard this. He said with a smile that the wicked had come to their aid. The paladin he stopped said loudly that they, people with a wicked soul, cannot go further. Otherwise, this deity will become even stronger. He did not pay attention to this, walked further and asked, so this is their enemy? That statue? The paladin got angry and asked loudly, why did they all come here? He was convicted of theft. Does she even remember what her previous job was? The protagonist got very angry because of their words and loudly told these hypocrites that they should shut their mouths already. If God blesses only those who live without sin, then why did he make the tax collector an apostle? Why did Shinran preach that sinners are the ones who will be saved? His words raised the fighting spirit of the adventurers, and he said that now they will show them that a person can start over at any time, and what is the true strength of adventurers who moved forward, making mistakes over and over again. Naomi looked at them with a worried expression on her face and did not notice the wolf that jumped towards her. He ran up to her very quickly and killed the monster with one blow of his sword. He took out his staff and said that they would save the talking for later. First, they needed to survive. He created lightning, which he used to attack several monsters at once. She drank a potion to restore her strength and said that these monsters were much stronger than those on the 40th floor. They could not be defeated with items. He said that this meant that they could only fight them face to face. She began to use magic and said with a serious expression that it would strengthen them. Her energy engulfed the adventurers, who quickly ran to attack. They acted together and attacked the huge monster together. He fought against the rest of the monsters and thought that she was doing an excellent job of supporting them. If everything had gone according to the hero's plan, they would have easily cleared this place. Now there were half as many of them. Would they be able to break through? The remaining paladins fled, and he said that there were too many monsters. Does she have any ideas on how to defeat them? Naomi agreed with a serious expression and said that she would use atonement on the statue. He looked at her and thought that it was the only battle spell of the Holy Maiden class. It converted life force into magical energy and simply wiped the enemy off the face of the earth. However, the price for destroying a boss of this level would definitely be death. He asked if she was sure about this. She agreed with a serious expression and said that she had always been willing to give up her life to defeat evil. He accepted her idea and said loudly that if they continued to fight them one by one, they would not win this fight. They needed to make a path for the Holy Maiden to reach the statue. Everyone who remained stood around her and looked at the monsters with serious faces. The adventurers ran to attack the monsters that were running at them. The adventurers and the remaining paladins fought together against the remaining monsters. Naomi successfully reached the monster statue and stopped in front of it. She thanked them and said that she could handle it herself from now on. She began to concentrate her energy and said that she was Indra's arrow, the thunder of the Lord. Let her flesh become the salt of the earth and the divine enemy fall. She did not finish the spell and looked at her hands with a very frightened expression on her face. She was trembling with horror and saw blood on her hands. She raised her head with a very frightened expression on her face and asked why she was shaking all over. MC ran up to her and reflected the dark energy with a blow of his sword. He asked, looking death in the face, did she feel fear for her life? She looked at her trembling hands with a very frightened expression on her face and tried to say something. He stroked her head and said that it was normal to be afraid of death. Even gods screamed in despair before his execution, afraid to part with life. Does this really destroy him in her eyes? She began to wipe away her tears and said that, however, as a saint, she could only sacrifice herself to defeat the enemy of God. She could do nothing else. She didn't have time to finish because he said that she was wrong. There was something else that only she could do. He looked at her with a smile and said that she should pray. A holy virgin was obliged to offer a prayer to God for salvation. Wasn't that right? Naomi looked at him with tears in her eyes and thought that all the years she had followed the scriptures, her faith had been unwavering and her life righteous. However, isn't true prayer when faced with injustice? She simply hands everything over to God and begs for salvation. She knelt down, continued to cry, began to pray, and thought that it seemed that until this moment she didn't know what real prayer was. Because of her prayer, the statue stopped emitting dark energy. She looked at the statue with a blank expression, and he said with a smile that she had done a great job. He stood in front of the statue and thought that two things were needed to change jobs: the priestess's prayer and the consecrated altar. Under normal circumstances, an adventurer would not be able to change jobs while in the midst of battle. Besides, when the holy altar was under the enemy's control. He thought with a small smile that he was an exception to the rule. However, the system notified that the job change was activated. Analysis of the altar's affiliation. Analysis completed. The altar was under human control. He must choose a job. Berserker. Attack is the best defense. Condition. Kill an enemy that is much stronger than him. Skills. Lone giant. Double kill. Paladin. He who tastes the fog and plucks poisonous ears. Condition. Karma is greater than 200. The current value is 280. The threshold has been met. Prove yourself in battles with the undead. The title of Sacred Killer is available. Jester. Tragedy from afar. It is a comedy. Condition not found. Naomi asked with a happy expression, is this a change of profession? It was activated even in the captured temple. He looked at her happy face with a small smile and said that it was because of her prayer. She said that the choice was obvious. In order to serve her, he should choose a paladin. She ran around him with a happy look and said that paladins have healing magic, and they have the highest defense. Besides, not many people in the temple can boast of such a profession. He was going to choose another profession and said that he asks for forgiveness, but he does not really want to be attached to the gods, so he will choose this one. She was shocked by what she saw and loudly asked what he did. A strong energy engulfed him, and the system notified that the profession change was activated. His appearance changed, and the system notified that Yukito changed his profession and became a jester. She looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked why, out of all the available professions, He chose the worst one? He thought that even in his past life no one had ever chosen this profession, because all of the jester's skills were built on probability and luck. People who chose this profession couldn't understand the essence and constantly lost. A profession whose power was tied to luck, that's what he needed. He said that he couldn't help but be buffed. She ran to her staff and said that she would do it now. She put a buff on him, and he thought that, firstly, the buff gave a bonus to attack power and crit. Secondly, his title of Holy Assassin gave him a 30% bonus to attack against the undead. He swung his sword, and thought that, thirdly, when activating Crushing Strike, there was an increase in critical damage. And finally, the effect of the Sparkling Flash skill. He was going to finish off the statue with the next attack, and the system notified that this was a skill with a 50% chance that the next attack would deal 10 times the damage. With a 50% chance, all stats are reduced to 1/10 of their original values. Duration, 1 hour. He ran to the statue, which continued to function, and swung his sword, filled with powerful energy. The creature directed its energy at him, but he did not pay attention to it. He struck the statue with a very strong blow with his sword, and said that he had heard that history remembers slaves who became kings and jesters who challenged the gods themselves. He defeated the statue with this blow, and the adventurer said loudly with a smile that this was excellent. Their leader had fallen. The others looked at the monsters and said that they only had to finish off the minions. Because the statue's boost had worn off, they easily defeated the remaining monsters. The adventurer said that the fight was finally over. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Naomi looked to the side and saw a bright light in the windows. He noticed the system notification that he had defeated Baal's double. He was given a new title, Dark God Slayer, and his damage to the undead was increased by 50%. Maximum damage dealt was updated. The threshold had been exceeded, and the Crushing Strike skill had evolved into Absolute Crush. She began to cry with joy, and the system announced that the temple had come under human control.